the Valley Current.
Hey, Bobby.
Yes.
Hey, you're sounding good.
I mean, I look as good as ever.
You look as good as ever? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I look as good as ever.
Well, that's beautiful. Is the look working for you? Are you doing reverse aging?
No, and in fact, I'm getting fat. Everybody comes and brings me food. I can't stop eating. It's terrible. But I have started putting in the garden, and that helps a lot. And the swimming pool helps, of course.
Oh yeah,
so I am getting a little bit of exercise.
You got the warm swimming pool now, right?
I have a swimming pool, and it's generally warm. So yeah,
it's a beautiful thing, right?
No, it really is. It's a great place overlooking the river. It's a great place for parties. Tonkom has 3 kids, and the kids are in the pool all the time. It's really different. Really different. I was never like a big social hound before, but now, just because of the physical setting, I am. It's crazy.
You've had a transformation.
Well, I've certainly took my opportunities. Yeah.
No, I mean, a lot of people can't do that. A lot of people get stuck in a certain geography, and of course, you were, I guess, still are a professor of geography with a specialty in Southeast Asia, and now you're living in Laos. And you're making a community there, which most other people wouldn't even know how to begin to do because you don't speak the language.
Well, I worked on it for like 20 years off and on. I mean, it's not like just showing up in Tajikistan and expecting good things to happen. You really have to lay the groundwork.
Right. You laid the groundwork in a very unique way that I've been arguing that should result in a memoir about how you did it, because you certainly have had an interesting life with a lot of chapters to it, include a lot of transitions from one to another. And this latest transition sounds like it's marvelously successful. I tried to talk you out of building that house, but I have to say, you proved me wrong. You really did build a beautiful mansion on a relatively small budget compared to what it would have cost.
Yes. I think it'll come in at about $750. Everything, land, building, furnishings, and in fact, that's generous. Probably a bit less than that.
Yeah.
And
so that's for.
And not only that,
you got about 7,000 square feet there with the outdoor space.
No, nothing like that. 3,000 in the main house, and then there's some outbuildings and a guest house. So I guess about 5,000.
Well, still 5,000 square feet with the land, with the ginormous view of the river, with the really a neighborhood that's in a very special, within walking distance of the downtown, or certainly biking distance for sure, and 5-minute drive if you're driving and you've got a car there. So you can't build and have land anywhere in California for less than, some people would say, 1,000 a square foot. I like to say maybe you could do it in certain areas of Northern California for $600 or $700 a square foot. But you've got essentially like $100, maybe $150 a square foot with the land and the view and all the amenities that you've baked in, including a lot of internal mahogany bookcases, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's huge.
Yes. No, it's great. It's great. It is.
And it could sleep.
The main difference between Laos and America, one main difference, is that in America, products are cheap, like a car is 5 months or 6 months salary. People are expensive, and here it's the other way around. Service is very, very cheap, but products are like 5 years salary.
Right.
A car is 5 or 6 or 8 years salary, but I can have a staff of 3 and support them on Social Security. It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, that's a big point, because as people get older, most times material things, as in products, don't matter anymore. What's much more important is service. Like if you actually look at a lifetime, you start in the womb and you're born, and basically you're taken care of, hopefully, by parents that love you. And that's a service relationship. I mean, I hate to say it so bluntly, but it's true. And that continues until maybe you're, 7 or 8, and you're kind of able to maybe begin to care for yourself. Maybe people would say it's 12 or 13, 14. You're an adult at 18, you're supposed to be able to care for yourself. And sometimes people leave for college, as you did. And I don't think you did, right? You actually went to school in New York, so you
No,
did.
I went to Brandeis in Boston.
Oh, Boston. Okay, Boston. So like me, you kind of leave for school, and you're on your own, and you're an adult, and then basically you're acquiring a lot of products from compensation you get from whatever job or employment or career that you have. And it's a very product laden life, as we see with Amazon delivering stuff on drones. I mean, same day, sometimes within a few hours. That's where they're headed. They're going to get rid of all the UPS drivers or most of the Amazon drivers. And so then you get to like your 70s or 80s or 90s for sure. And you don't care so much about products. You don't care about buying a car. You want a chauffeur. You want a service provider. You want someone to make sure there's air in the tires, right? You don't want to have to.
Yes, and to drive you around, because after a while, it's not a good idea to try to do it yourself.
Right. And
right.
It's a dangerous world out there. So, one false move and a lot can happen by mistake, and not intentionally, but a lot of people get injured just in accidents, as we know. So I think that future and the formula you just described is really an accurate formula, that you can move into a service economy that really wants to do the services at a really reasonable daily rate or monthly rate. And you can live on your Social Security check like a king, particularly if you build a beautiful mansion like you built. And I wanted to ask you, how many people can sleep? Because I thought you were going to end up having like enough room for like 16 people total.
I have enough room for one couple and one single person in the main house. I gave Tongkam the guest house. Okay. So that was the original plan, was that I would B&B it, but we're not doing that.
Okay.
And it's amazing. He has half the space, and he's got, let me think, him, his wife, his parents, and 3 children, 7 and 2 cats, 7 people and 2 cats in half the size that I occupy as a single person. It's really amazing. The Lao are not used to living alone. They just do not understand how people do that.
Do you feel at all?
They really like to be in the midst all the time. It's very different that way.
Do you feel a little, what's the right word for it? Like, do you feel they should have more space and you should have less space? I mean, it's your house, but I'm kind of curious. Your point is they just are used to that kind of gesture.
Yes, for a while, I thought, this really doesn't look too good. We should really do it the other way around. And maybe they'll resent it when they realize that, but they don't resent it. They're incredibly happy to be here. They bring me food all the time. They write things about me on Facebook that are, really lavish and charming. It's amazing. It is.
Well, you are their provider. You're like the godfather, if you think about it.
In a lot of ways, that's right.
Right. So you've adopted.
And it's a good investment too.
You've kind of adopted them, but in truth, they've kind of adopted you.
Yes, exactly.
And nothing formal.
I wanted to ask you something about. I wanted to ask you one thing about Florida. So, Are you on the coast?
Yeah, we're on hurricane watch number 2. Hurricane watch.
Yeah, I know. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, hurricane watch number 1 was Helene. We had just coincidentally decided to go to New York. This time of year, I used to visit my dad in New York. Of course, he's been deceased for a while, but I would always go kind of late September, early October, on the view that was the best time of year to be in New York. I still think that's true. It is the best time.
Yes.
Now, all of my relatives that were in New York are all basically gone. They're all deceased. There might be a few stray cousins around that I haven't talked to in a long time, but there was a big Russo family. There was a big Castellano family, which is my grandmother's maiden name. Mm-hmm. There was a big, and still is a big family called the Gargiulio family, which has the restaurants in Coney Island. It has a restaurant in Coney Island. It's a very famous restaurant called Gargiulio's. In fact, it comes up in a book that I'm listening to right now that I've been recommending to everyone about Trump's life from the father's perspective. It's called Lucky Loser. And it talks about how much money the father has actually directly or indirectly provided to Donald Trump. It's a tremendous amount of money that, had that money just been put into an S&P fund, it would be worth like billions now. And Trump basically dwindled it away is the theory of this, or thesis of this book. It's by like 3 New York Times reporters. And what comes up is apparently the father loved to go to Gargiulo's restaurants in Coney Island. And, you know, they of course were doing a bunch of projects in Brooklyn under government programs. So they actually had offices in Coney Island. So it's kind of interesting that this stuff all ties together. But we were in New York for Helene. We were watching TV and saying, oh, shit, can it be that bad? When we got back, most of the properties that we have here were okay. There was one property that got flooded, and it just isn't high enough off the ground. It's too close to the water, and all the furniture got destroyed. The furniture was pretty old, but basically it all got destroyed. Now, this one sounds like it's going to be worse, and it sounds like it's going to be more direct hit. So we're actually planning on leaving. We're planning on leaving to come to California tomorrow before the storm.
Who's leaving California? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, we're in California part of the time.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to California tomorrow.
Yeah. To avoid this, I mean, you actually become very facile at using various tools on finding flights at reasonable pricing. And of course, you're traveling so much that you've got like tremendous status. We get upgraded all the time to first class. Like we've got tremendous status. I've got tremendous status with Hertz. I've got what's called presidential status. They bring the car to you at Hertz, like literally at your gate. Like they're trying to be back in the service business. We're talking about services, but you've done that in Laos. And of course, it's a far easier retirement in some ways because you probably are creating value in that property. And my guess is that property will be worth 3 to 5 times more than its cost.
I can't imagine what it will be worth on the market in a few years. When I first came here 5 years ago, I expected a huge Chinese influx and prices going up to match. And instead what happened was COVID. And so that program was put on hold basically for 2 years, but now it's restarted. And so yesterday I was in Luang Prabang buying some ice cream, and I was sitting out 15 minutes. Every single non-Lao person is Chinese, okay? And we have a railroad going straight to Kunming in China, and we are going to be Sinicized up to the wazoo. In addition to the house I'm living in, I've got 2 other pieces, and I expect them to triple.
Right, but you're not really doing this stuff for trading. You're doing it for long-term investment.
As for this, I really don't know how high it could go, but it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. It's practically unique along the river, as far as I can see, taking the boat up and down. And I don't know how much I could charge for it. I may never find out.
Oh no, you mean for like an Airbnb? What you could charge?
Oh, what I would charge as an Airbnb. Wow. I thought you meant to resell.
Oh, to resell. To resell, you could probably set any price based on somebody who wants to get the newest product.
It is a unique and gorgeous property. It really is.
And you really lived through or enjoyed working.
Yeah, the teething problems, exactly.
What, 2+ years, or was it more like 3?
I spent 2 years trying to get an architect who would deliver on time at decent designs. And one could do one, but not the other. One did decent designs, but was drunk and would take a month to do a day's work. And the other was just hopeless. So I basically didn't start until a year and a half ago, even though I've held the property since COVID for 4 years. So I wasted 2 years and a fraction, and I've been building for a year and a half.
Right. So I saw, because we visited you, I saw the army of people that were there, and they seemed to be pretty diligent in doing what they were doing. I don't know if they could.
Yeah, they were. After that, the rainy season started. About Florida hurricanes, which is the new one, has a geography that I have never seen before. Normally, they start up like 1,000 miles southwest of the Bahamas and spin and then hit the continental U.S. from the southeast.
Right.
Okay. This one started off Yucatan, which is a really short throw. Okay. But it's turned into a major hurricane in that short throw and aimed directly at Tampa Bay. It's unbelievable.
Right.
That could happen again.
Right. Yeah. We're like, Lee, of course, is a hydrogeologist, so she gives me all the science on it. But fundamentally, the real cause seems to be the rise in temperature that exists.
Sure.
And the rise in temperature continues. And, the water, when you go in the water here, it's pretty warm. Like, it's shockingly warm when you think about what it's like in the Pacific Ocean side, like from Stinson Beach, for example. So it's quite a difference. But I wanted to transition for a minute, and let me just set the background to this, which is, I've been listening to a lot of stuff about the historical Trump, and I keep wondering why the Democratic Party doesn't bring up some of the stuff that just is so well documented that tends to prove that we don't really have a great decision maker in the way he makes decisions. I know he would strongly disagree with that, but when you listen to a number of the decisions he made that were almost at odds with the way his father used to do business. His father was a very frugal guy, very careful on costs, very introspective and quiet, not extroverted at all. I mean, Donald turned out to be the opposite of Fred. Fred's the father. There's also a Fred Jr. that was the oldest son, but he's kind of a goner in this story because he gets kind of pushed out, becomes an airline pilot. That's a separate story. But just generally, like 17 people are identified indirectly or maybe even directly in Jack Smith's latest filing last week, which is all like 185 pages of paperwork, where he's documenting all of the co-conspirators. Of course, Rudy Giuliani is in there, a bunch of people in there, and they're all typically were lawyers in good standing for the most part. I mean, Giuliani may have had a checkered record, but basically most of the people in there are not like felons. I mean, Trump is now a felon to boot based on what happened in that New York conviction. But conceptually, what happens to those people? Like, I just think to myself,
oh, I see. So that's what you're asking.
They got caught up in the tribe and they became the tribe with him. And like the rest of the tribe is getting prosecuted and thrown in jail and losing their bar licenses and a million different things. And Donald is just like above it all, right?
So the question you asked me was not, how many years are each of them likely to do, about which I know nothing. And of course, it depends on whether Trump pardons them all or not also. So we're not speaking about that. We're speaking about why do you convert to become an accolade for this scum, right? I mean, that's the issue.
Right.
And I have no idea.
Like I was thinking to myself, so pretend that you've been offered a position to do work on the Trump constitutional team. There's a team that's just, doing brainstorming around what new constitutional argument can be made on this, that, and the other point. And I'm thinking, what kind of due diligence do you do? And for my money, you would definitely read a few books, maybe including even his books, because he's got 3 of them that were all co-authored by. So I'm just saying, like, if you were to be offered a position on the Trump team, how do you decide whether you want to go in it when you can see all the roadkill that's been around? Like, how do you decide that it's okay to kind of get involved with someone that has really spawned a lot of crashed careers, a lot of professionals that basically are either going to jail or they're going to lose their license and be tossed out of their prestigious positions at various firms?
Well, let's talk about the 17 people, because I don't know virtually any of them. Were they all political to begin with and then became political for Trump, or were they detached professionals who somehow enlisted anyway?
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter. I mean, obviously, Giuliani was a politician, and Giuliani had been the mayor of New York, and Giuliani had been a U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, which is a very prestigious job back as a young lawyer. But I think he was...
Yes, I remember. He was featured on 60 Minutes sitting, listening to Mozart and indicting people. No, this is really true. And he was considered a young hero.
He was considered a young hero. And I know that when he came in as mayor, the view was he brought a lot of diligence to recreate the city in a way that lots of the prior mayors had kind of let the city fall apart. And I think the view was he was really like a new broom that swept clean and very much the enforcer, so that, people just, basically got some religion. I mean, we don't have that in San Francisco. If you see these videos of groups that enter Apple stores and steal all the equipment off the shelf and just walk out of the store scot-free. I mean, if that store were in Florida, they would probably be shot at by the security guards before they were able to leave the premises. I mean, it would be a totally different perspective. I should mention here, there's a very funny sign that you see on some of these items that are out on the street to dry off. Of course, now it's raining, so they're not going to dry off. And now it's really going to storm. They may be blowing in the air, becoming projectiles. I mean, think about that. There's a bunch of furniture that's out on the street. They've got signs on it that said, "You loot, we shoot." Like literally, this is stuff that's been waterlogged, and they've got it out on the street, and they're hoping that it dries out. I mean, they can't keep it in the house because they're dealing with, getting the water out of the house. So they got to put it out on the street. They put it out on the curb. So it looks kind of like, a crazy slum in most of these neighborhoods near the beach. But some of them have signs up, because I guess there are people that pass by and say, "Oh, that looks like a nice bicycle. I think I'll take it," right? But it's not meant to be taken. It's just meant to be drying out, I suppose. So
anyway, going back to the question you posed, I have no idea. And one of the problems I'm having is a complete lack of EQ about the whole thing from start to finish. Okay? I have no idea why anybody finds Trump attractive, let alone becomes a lieutenant in the army. I just have no clue about this. I don't.
Well,
I just can't see it for beans. And that's on me. It's not on them.
Well,
you're comprehensible to me. But I literally do not understand it, and so I can't answer you.
Right. So you're in Laos, but you still are voting as though you are a U.S. citizen. You still have a U.S. passport. I don't think you've gotten your Laos passport yet. Maybe.
No, almost impossible.
Okay, but just in general, you're going to vote by absentee ballot, I would assume, right?
No, you assume incorrectly. By the time I started thinking about the embassy here had a deadline of 1 October, and I only started thinking about it on September 26th or something, and that would have meant a trip to Vientiane to go to the embassy and basically no, I missed the boat.
Okay, so the rule, that's interesting. I didn't know the rule for an overseas expat is to go to the local embassy, and they give you the form there, and they kind of take it and put it in a sealed
I think I could have done it electronically, but the deadline, now that I look back on it, and so maybe I didn't have to go to Vientiane now that I look back on it, but the October 1 deadline was real, and right. I just missed it.
Most people don't realize that different rules apply based on where you're located. Like today,
based on which embassy you're dealing with, yeah.
Right, because I imagine the French embassy might be different than the UK embassy. The US embassy in each of those countries might be different.
Well, we've had a charge d'affaires for the last couple of years. The last guy was great, and he moved on to some, somewhat larger country. Mm-hmm. And since then, it's just been drifting. So
he's making his
there
way
it is.
He's making his way up the southeastern chain. He's in Vietnam now and hopes to kind of make his way up from there.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great entry-level position at that level.
Well, you could serve.
I mean, it's probably the smallest country in Asia.
You could serve if you want to, right?
Yeah, if I want to. If you ever got past the security check, yeah, I suppose I could.
If you wanted a job in the U.S. government, they might have a hard time based on age, but they're not supposed to discriminate, I don't think.
Well, it's an interesting situation in terms of foreign policy. American policy is based on forming counterweights to China in this part of the world. Mm-hmm. And if there is a counterweight, it's going to be Vietnam, which has a long, long history of asserting its independence from China. And by long, I mean 2,000 years long. Other than that, Thailand has a consistent foreign policy of always being friends with the biggest power in sight, which is guess who? Cambodia was bought and sold by China years ago. Myanmar is being boycotted by the entire Western world. So who do they turn to but China? So if there's any hope of forming an anti-Chinese front in Southeast Asia, it rests on Vietnam because there isn't anybody else.
It's weird that we were in a war with them.
I've been expecting them to be part of that front, to join Japan, Singapore, India, and the U.S. Navy in resisting China's efforts to take over the South China Sea. But I'm wrong. They're leaning the other way. And the clearest sign of that is that they and China have agreed to build 3 more railway lines connecting China and Vietnam. And if you were in Vietnam in the defense ministry and were asked whether you thought that was a good idea, you would say, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. But they're doing it anyway. So they're not interested in defending against China, is what it says to me.
Okay, so your earlier point that Vietnam is fiercely independent stands, but your view is they've created an alliance, an economic alliance, and I guess an industrial alliance with China.
I think they've given up on resisting, basically.
Yeah. So, but the point that I thought was kind of arising out of all this is we were at war with Vietnam, as we all remember, because we were all drafted into that war with various college deferments and whatnot that were legitimately asserted. Although at one point I thought it was going to end up not going to college, and they said, well, then you're definitely going to go to Vietnam. So conceptually, the Vietnamese are friendly to the U.S. and may represent the best way for the U.S. to maintain a view that Taiwan should remain independent, because that's what's at stake in terms of this waterway, right?
As I said before, the South China Sea, which basically if Vietnam did not have an open access to the larger world ocean, it must go through the South China Sea. It's critical to Vietnam that happens, that China not own the South China Sea outright. And Taiwan is like the cork in the bottle of the South China Sea, if you look at a map. So Taiwan and its independence, and Vietnam and its independence in the South China Sea are really two sides of the same coin. And so I expected Vietnam to maintain its independence by joining the forces that don't want China to take over Taiwan. Put it another way, if China did take over Taiwan, it would close the northern entryway into the South China Sea, which in effect is taking over the South China Sea. So I expected Vietnam to join the resistance to that Chinese takeover, but they're not.
Yeah, you're saying
yes, this does compromise the security of Taiwan in the long run.
Right. And I guess my question is, Vietnam produces a lot of goods that would otherwise be produced by China, and I think there's...
No, I don't agree with that.
No?
I think the Chinese labor market is getting more expensive because of the one-child policy, basically. They have a labor shortage. And so Vietnam was taking over the lower-end stuff that China used to do 20 years ago.
Okay. But who has the larger degree of trade with Vietnam? Is it U.S. or is it China at this point?
Labor force less expensive than China.
Right, but who does the greater volume of business with Vietnam? U.S.
I don't know offhand. I don't know if it's the U.S. or not the U.S. I mean, it could easily be Germany. I mean, I really don't know.
Oh, I think it's the U.S. by far. I mean, I'll try to verify the numbers.
You could be right.
I think it's the U.S. by far, and I think maybe China is a far second, and then you get to Europe and Germany and the rest. But
you could be right.
I'll double check that. In fact, there's an AI component that's baked into this product that's supposed to be able to ask meeting questions. So I'm just going to ask it, who does greater trade with Vietnam? USA or China? Let's see if I can answer this. This is baked
I would
in.
ask, who are Vietnam's biggest trade partners? You get a list, because Japan could be on the list.
Okay. Yeah, it didn't provide an answer. It actually went back to the meeting to try to find the answer, but we're in a meeting that's raising the questions but not doing the answer. So obviously I have to go elsewhere for this. But getting back to the point of what you've found out about services, do you think that's true in Vietnam as well? Like you're in Laos.
Of course.
You're in Laos, right? Would you think you could have done the same thing that you did in Laos in Vietnam if the visa rights?
In terms of the economics, they're probably similar, though Laos is probably a couple of cuts under Vietnam. In other words, service is probably even cheaper here than it is in Vietnam, but certainly service in Vietnam is a fraction of what it is in the United States, of course, minor fraction.
Right.
I don't know if the regulatory apparatus in Vietnam is as forgiving and light-handed as it is here in Laos. I just have no idea of that. Laos welcomes anybody, basically, with a relatively small amount of money to come be an investor, have a permanent visa or annually renewable visa, to be exact, and do business without a problem. And I make a point of being extremely friendly with the local authorities. I just donated 1 million GIP to the local police for their annual picnic. I mean, that's gonna, and not only did I do that, it's like $42. Can you imagine being shaken down for $42? It's embarrassing.
But the fact that you could buy a picnic
and I gave the local school a couple of $100s to buy books and so forth. So I'm really like a local baron here. And whether Vietnam is as forgiving with foreigners, I don't know. They tend to be much more nationalistic than Laos is and care much more about national identity and purity and that stuff than Laos is. But I really don't know.
Okay, so I got the data, just to put in the data on Vietnam. The top 10 trading partners of Vietnam, at the top is the U.S. with what looks like, if I'm reading this correctly, close to $100 billion. China looks like it's close to $55 or $56 billion. South Korea, $21 billion.
Oh, interesting.
Japan, $20 billion.
Interesting.
Hong Kong, 12. Hong Kong is separated out from China, 12. Thailand, 6. Thailand 8, Netherlands 7, Germany 7, India 6, and then they've got Taiwan, and they say the exports from Vietnam are not in the top 10%, but the imports to Vietnam from Taiwan are $15 billion. Maybe it's that.
I'm surprised in Korea. Korea is half the size of Japan, and yet puts a bigger footprint in Vietnam. And the same is true here in Laos about Korea.
Right. So
interesting.
The U.S. is Vietnam's largest export market, significant lead over the other countries. So I would assume that's an important fact. But you point out that that's not going to stop them from doing their railroad based on subsidies and other grants that the Chinese make do that, right?
Well, I was not focusing on their economic ties, which I suppose will survive, whether they are resisting China militarily or not. My only point was that they're not.
So to get back.
And so if China made a big move in the South China Sea, which I'm beginning to think is quite likely, I don't expect Vietnam to try to prevent them. And if they do that, you can kiss Taiwan goodbye at the same time.
Right. So let's go back for a second to this close, tight election that seems to be almost next.
Yes.
Right. Do you think Kamala Harris and I guess she calls him Coach Waltz, Tim Waltz is Coach Waltz now, when you get an email from her seeking to raise money, it's me and Coach Waltz. And I keep saying, that's like saying I need to be coached by the vice president. So I call him Coach. And do you think they have the foggiest idea of all the geopolitical details that you
Well,
care?
it turns out Waltz is a geography teacher in high school.
He was.
But
I didn't know that.
yes, he was. And so I
know.
was trying to like the guy, but
Right.
my first take on him was that it should have been Kelly because Waltz is a lightweight and
Right.
Harris is a lightweight. So that's not balancing the ticket in terms of heavyweights. It's lightweight and lightweight.
And
I don't want to say bad things about her. If you go back 3 months ago, everybody was doing doom and gloom quite correctly. That was a hopelessly bad situation. She was parachuted in quite late. She does not have a big profile. And given all those detriments, and the fact that she does represent the current administration, which does have a lot to answer for. Okay, there's a tendency that when you really can't stand Trump to want to contradict everything he says, but some of the things he says about the current administration are correct. I'm sorry. And given all those detriments, I think she well exceeded my expectations, and so I liked her. I still do like her, but she has detriments. I mean, face it.
well, I'm wondering whether
She ran up the street and then down the other side on fracking. That is the truth. Okay. Immigration is an even bigger pivot. I don't care that much about immigration or fracking, so I don't care that much. But these are valid criticisms. And in fact, let me take a step back. What do you think of the Biden administration? I mean, never mind better than Trump, which I think we can take as read. So yes, I supported Biden in 2020, chiefly on the grounds that he couldn't be worse than Trump. But so putting that aside, what do you think of the Biden record?
Well, I hate to say it,
and I ask because every election is about the incumbent,
right.
Fundamentally. In this case, there are like two quasi-incumbents, but still, at least in the quasi sense, we have to talk about the incumbent. So what do you think of the incumbent?
Well, I felt that he was just a little bit too slow cognitively to even take the office to begin with. And I was kind of surprised that the way this played out was that he became the guy that basically was being supported for this role. I was kind of surprised by that. Because I do think, unfortunately, there is some truth to that Dr. Peter Attia article that I think I forwarded to you, that your decline is not linear. The decline actually takes a larger jump back down at ages 4, according to the data, at ages 44, and then again at 60. And so the measurement suggests that it's not a straight line. It really does.
If you took an average of the entire population and profiled it, mental decline versus age, you might see not discontinuities, but changes in slope at 44 and 60.
That's what they found. There's actual scientific study on it that's in the latest Peter Attia, MD article. And I think his view, based on his clinical work, because he does deal with people that pay him $90,000 a year for concierge medicine services on how they can get to supercentenarian status, 110, more than 100. And he's training them with the view of it's a marathon and you got to pace yourself through it. And he provides that pacing service at a very expensive annual rate. He also provides a free podcast that fundamentally has all the information in it. You just have to be able to organize it yourself. And he has a bunch of other stuff. I'm not doing this as an ad for him, but conceptually, he is trying to provide people with insights on how they can keep their health span to be long, their lifespan to be long, and their brain span. And I think that really almost from the beginning, Biden's brain span was on kind of a short fuse. I think his health span is probably okay, and maybe his lifespan will be into his 90s. But cognitively, I don't think he's there. And there were lots of examples of it. And if you search for the bloopers, you can put in Biden bloopers. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of bloopers out there that tend to support that view. Now, does that matter? Does that matter?
Easily. Well, I was going to say, you don't have to convince me because I believed it a year ago. And basically, he should have announced his retirement a year ago because he handed Kamala a very, very tough hand to play. And she's played it relatively well. I mean, given that was the hand she was handed. But it's still a tough situation.
Right. If you look at the way the transition of power should have gone, is we should have had a real runoff of Democratic.
Well, that's an interesting question. What would have happened in that case? And we don't know. Maybe Gavin Newsom. Maybe it would have been Kamala. Maybe.
Well, there would have been.
I mean, who else is there?
There would have been somebody that came out of the woodwork for sure, because it's too big of a role for the Democrats not to have another horse in the race. And it's not like, I was getting back to the point about, do any of these folks have the foggiest idea of what's going on in the geopolitics of Southeast Asia, realistically? I mean, you're on the ground there and you're observing stuff.
I'm on the ground there because I knew it was, that's not true. I'm on the ground here because I came to Bangkok in 1988 and I loved it. But yeah, I mean, as you know, I think the Ukraine is important as a European issue. I think the South China Sea is important as a global issue. I think it's 6 or 8 times the size of the Ukraine. But
way more.
Find somebody else who agrees with me.
Well, I agree with you for sure. And I think a lot of people, including the press, haven't picked up on the choke point that South China Sea issue raises.
Yeah.
Because most of the chips in the world at the moment come out of TSMC, which is in Taiwan. It's Taiwan.
Well, if you're going to mainland China or Korea or Taiwan or Japan on the one side, or to India, the Persian Gulf, the Suez Canal, and Europe on the other side, you are going through the South China Sea. And yes, that's more than half the shipping in the world. Yes.
Right. So
and if it's a Chinese lake, then more than half the shipping in the world is going to pay tolls to China. That's all there is to it.
Right. And it's more than just tolls, right? I mean, it's actually probably some
toll and control.
Control, right. So it's more control. And it's, to my way of thinking, there's a very high level negotiation going on between China and the US. I doubt that either Kamala or Donald would be doing it in any real serious way. I don't think they have the depth of knowledge to be doing it. And probably Xi is not doing it on the other side. But there's a high level negotiation over to what degree will advanced AI technology and something called AGI, which is advanced general artificial intelligence, AGI being the general intelligence, which is like a supercharged version of everything we've seen so far. How much of that gets shared with China voluntarily versus how much of that will be basically F you, we're not giving it to you, it's too important, and you're going to have to try to steal it from us, and we're going to prevent you or prosecute you. And the ultimate trumping card is you're not going to get the hardware you need to run any of this stuff because we're going to shut down Taiwan. And you're not going to get, that's why there's this feverish effort to now start building factories in the US, which of course raises all sorts of pollution and power issues when you start putting, factories that make these chips that run very heavy duty chemicals through the system. So it was appropriately outsourced, if you ask me, but it was outsourced in a direction where it's so concentrated that chokehold can really change things, and the negotiation would probably change.
This is, in other words, if Japan said, "The hell with this, we're going to have our own capability," or if India said that, or Germany said that, would that be possible?
Yeah, it is
to replicate the production, and in what time frame?
It is possible, but the time frame tends to go out to 3 to 7 years and not 3 to 7 months.
Oh well.
it's not a snap your fingers. Well, I've got the blueprints. Just take off. These facilities cost billions to build and many billions to perfect. And there's a lot of weird stuff that goes into it. Like if you put it too close to a place that has tremors, like any sort of movement that causes the equipment to move, produces bad yield because basically the photolithography becomes blurred from the movement. So you have to put it in a place that has cheap electricity, that's very stable bedrock, that doesn't have any earthquakes. So Intel had a lot of factories in Santa Clara County in California, and it's like the stupidest thing in the world. When an earthquake happened, factories like basically had to shut down, and they lost a lot of yield as a result of the tremors that happened inside the building. So having factories in California, particularly in on the Silicon Valley, California, where we have earthquakes, not the smartest thing in the world. So Intel is building in Arizona now, and this CHIPS Act basically gave it some huge grants to do that. At the same time, Intel stock has floundered. That's a whole separate footnote. They may be in the process of being sold to Broadcom. There was sort of a bid that was put out there that, people were like, really, Intel? That's sort of like the mother of all startups. It started out of Fairchild. It's a group of guys. Such a great story. But conceptually, I don't think the leaders of these two parties have the foggiest idea of the importance of geography.
Yes, I mean, I agree with you. And if you ask Kamala Harris where the Spratly Islands is, you get a blank stare. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Right.
But still, I mean, Trump wouldn't even try to grapple with it. He would just go yellow bastards or some, inane, throwaway like that, and that would be the end of it. He doesn't even try. I think Kamala could read through a briefing book if you convinced her that it was worth her time. So I don't put them quite on a par.
Right. So she's a young, intelligent woman, obviously in better health, obviously, arguably in the prime of her life. I think she's about 50-something years old.
She just turned 60.
Just turned 60. Okay.
60. Yeah.
And no kids, right?
Well, stepkids, but yeah, that's right.
Like no, not having gone through any pregnancies or childbirth or raising kids or anything like that. So she probably is in some ways physically stronger than the average 60-year-old woman because she hasn't been through
She certainly looks good.
Right. So,
I mean, yeah.
So you could argue she kind of lucked out of the fact that Biden decided very late in the game, and then the party scrambled. And a lot of people they probably went to said no, is my guess of what happened.
As I remember, she got enough delegates within 24 hours to go over the top. Because after that Biden performance in May, June, and July, the last thing they wanted was further disruption,
right?
Let alone a party brawl. So yes, I mean it was that or drown basically.
But you have to say Trump kind of lucked out on the way this played out because I think in truth she isn't the strongest candidate that somewhere in the Democratic Party one could imagine putting up there. Think of Buttigieg that doesn't have some of the issues, right?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on who else we're talking about. I mean, Newsom looks good, but nobody really, really sways me as if it's Jack Kennedy in 1956. I just don't see it, and it's speculating anyway. So would they have found a better candidate than Kamala, given a year to boost that other person? I mean, it's pretty theoretical, you must admit.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up on this point, which is when you look at from afar, because you're basically in a foreign country, you're about 12 hours ahead or so from California, 13 hours, I think, from California.
I'm 12 or 13 ahead of Florida, when depending on whether it's daylight savings or not, and 9 or 10 ahead of California. No, well, or
The
behind
opposite.
California. I
The
mean,
opposite.
going around the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, opposite. Okay, you're Monday, and right now
Right.
it's
Monday morning.
Sunday.
Yes.
Right now it's Sunday night, and in California it's Sunday late afternoon. You start your day just about now, right? Typically, and the modern technology of Zoom when it works, which is pretty much most of the time.
Yeah, the only problem is that it's too hot to do anything in the afternoon. So I go out and go to the bank, do the shopping, 11 o'clock, time to retire, that kind of thing.
So you're up early and
Yeah,
out early.
yeah,
And
do the gardening before breakfast. Yeah,
right, as we know, if you wanted to get up really early, you could watch the monks hit the streets asking for alms, right?
that happens. That's funny. You don't have to go downtown. Every single lot has the monks go out in the morning.
Right. So
So I could basically do that from my front porch.
even in your neighborhood, they do it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
do you put stuff out for them?
Well, you have to it's kind of polite to do it yourself.
Yeah. So do you go out there with bread
I do not, no.
do you have someone do that from your roommates?
I basically no. In addition to the going out to see the monks, we have two sort of mini temples on the property. They're like big doll houses, and we service them. So that's basically what we do.
Oh, this is for what is it called?
Put food for them, yeah.
What's the name of those monsters, the sea monsters that might be there on the property?
Krakens? Oh no, Naga, yes.
Nagas. You have a couple of Nagas floating.
Yes, so the theory is that we do. We're right next to a small river, and the idea is that the Naga uses the small river to go from the Mekong inland. So we have a little temple to him, so he shouldn't bother us.
So
before we stop, there's one thing I want to do about American politics, and two things I want to do about American politics.
Right.
First is about Trump. When we started discussing this, I think it was Sunday morning here, Saturday night in London. I was reading The Guardian, and which of course is an anti-Trump paper. But the point is, on the home page, there were five stories about Trump, all negative, but five. There were two stories about American election looks close. There were zero stories about Kamala Harris.
Right.
And that's true generally. He just has a much, much bigger footprint than she does, for whatever reason. It was certainly true in 2016. CNN would run, Trump's plane is about to land, right? And then you look at a plane coming in for a landing for like half an hour, but Trump was on it, so that was airtime. It's weird, but it's true. And one of the reasons Trump is still standing is that he's worth 5 times the airtime as anybody else. Why it's true, I am not quite sure. As I say, I have no EQ about this, whatever, but it is true. And it keeps him up. Kamala has $1 billion to spend, and he has this. And that's why it's kind of equal. So that's the first thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, let me comment.
If you want to respond, go ahead, and then I've got the second thing.
Let me comment before you get to the second one on the first. He would say, and has routinely said, any publicity is good publicity. And to the common person in the street, just the fact that there are 5 stories about him means that he's got name recognition at the polls, that when someone steps up to sort of make a decision, it sounds corny, but I think it's true. There are a lot of people that will step up and they'll be like, yeah, I just don't know her, but I know the devil in him. And, he did a pretty good job of keeping us out of World War III, maybe would be the rationale, right? Because there wasn't really any initiation of any war while he was in office, right? And they'll just think that. And I'll tell you what I've done recently, because I want to drop a footnote. I've been asking common people, like the clerk at a gas station, those people, what are they going to do? And these tend to be kids, 19 to maybe, 29. They're all voting for Trump. They're all of the view that there's too many foreigners that are coming to the U.S. and they're taking.
Well, this puts a bad one, though. I mean, yes, obviously having 10 times the media recognition as Kamala Harris does him a world of good. Of course, the question is why. is he found to be so fascinating that he gets 10 times the coverage? And this is where my EQ falls out. I just don't know why, but he does.
Yeah. Now, your second point was?
The second point is long term. I don't know what's going to happen this year. I thought it would be Harris would be odds on, and she's not. It's a toss up, maybe even a little odds against at this point. But longer term, so toss up. Longer term, my feeling is extremely bleak, extremely bleak. I mean, if Trump is beaten this time, who will the Republicans run next time? It will not be Mitt Romney, okay? It will not be the Republican Party of yore. It will be J.D. Vance or Donald Trump Jr. or some other true believer.
Okay, so your view is, look,
which means that the Democrats have to win this time and next time and the time after that and the time after that, or else. And that is a very, very tall order.
You're predicting the radicalization of the Republican Party.
I'm not predicting it. I'm observing it.
Yeah, you're observing
After January 6th, I thought this guy is gone. And for a couple of days, it looked like he was. And then the electorate, or Republican electorate, told McCarthy and whoever, don't mess with Trump. And they didn't. They're gone already.
So
and they're not coming back.
So isn't the natural inclination of everything you just said to say we're on a path of a second civil war?
I don't know if it'll be a civil war, but whether it will be a civil war, or whether it will be a less traumatic transition, but it's on a transition to something rather Trumpy.
Right. But the point is that when you have a divisive nation, it's half of it goes one way, half of it goes the other, unless it's going to become two sets of United States, as some people have suggested, maybe it should break into two separate republics, like basically, southern United States and the rest of the United States. I mean, I think California would almost be viewed as a separate country itself. But conceptually, unless you're doing something that radical, you are in a state of either gridlock in Washington, D.C., which maybe is okay. Sometimes it's not okay. It kind of depends. Or you end up with this activity of like almost gang warfare, where people just say, I've had enough. You lose.
Well, in the first Civil War, it was purely regional. In other words, the South was geographically continuous. I mean, just to be really simple-minded about it. So we could form a separate nation, just by putting down boundary stakes around the South. That's not true now.
Right.
Okay, California, yes, it has LA and it has San Francisco, but then it has the whole rest of the state is more Trumpy than not.
Yeah, I think that's...
So where do you put down the boundary stakes?
Right.
The same is true in Chicago and Illinois. Same is true really in New York and Upper New York State. So it's hard to see how you coalesce countries with that much more complicated geography.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think rural America or semi-rural America is very different than municipal and metropolitan America. That's for sure. So Bob, just looking over your transition, which I guess has been now over for like the last 6 years.
I moved here the year before COVID. My original plan was to have 1 foot in America and 1 foot here. And America became so distasteful that I simply gave up on the other foot thing.
Right. So in 2025, next year, which we're coming up on, you will probably have your 6th anniversary of being in Laos. That's what it's saying, right?
Yes, minus 6 months for COVID when I was stuck in America, but yes.
Right. And so when you kind of look at that 6 years, do you say to yourself that, man, it's been such a more interesting ride than what would have played out if you stayed in Silicon Valley?
There's no comparison. I would do it again in a heartbeat, of course.
Well, you probably would do it again in a heartbeat like 10 years or 20 years earlier, right?
Well, part of emigrating is losing your ties to the existing country. So while my mother was still here and before Bonnie got sick and on and on. It was a slightly different equation. But after that was done, say 2015 at the very latest, and the job was gone. So after 2015 at the very latest, of course it made more sense to be here.
And in many ways, it's not like you miss tremendously the activities that you were doing in Silicon Valley or Berkeley or anywhere in Northern California, right?
Oh no! I mean, there's no dimension in which I'm not better off here.
Right. It's quite a statement in a way, because you're living in an environment where you don't yet speak the language, although I imagine you're quickly
I'm getting a little better, but not enough. Bye bye.
Right.
I'm getting a. That was a neighbor kid who just dropped in.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little better, but not enough to have a conversation.
Right. So that'll probably happen, which is kind of an amazing challenge that you took on a new, difficult language, which it is. And in many ways, it's like you haven't wanted for anything, including medical care so far, right? Which is what a lot of people would be.
That is a problem. I mean, it is. And the sensible way to deal with it is to fly to Bangkok and the hell with the money. But so far, I haven't felt compelled to do that.
Because Bangkok has a world medical system, right?
Yes, it does. And you can tell because I think if you did a biggest medical services volume, you would find the Emirates and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, there's a lot of medical tourism that happens in Bangkok, in Thailand.
Yes. Yes.
So really, there's like no regrets at all about this decision, even when you're going through a rainy season, which is about over now, right? Or is it over?
Yes, it's ending a little soon. And it's also true that the climate is changing here. April is always the hottest month, but normally the hottest month meant 90 or 95 every day. And this past year it meant 100 or 105 every day. That was a great leap forward. And if there are a couple more great leaps forward, it'll be sad. But that caveat aside, yeah.
But right now, the best season right now is kind of the November through March, isn't it?
That's what I'm saying. And another change is that the rainy season seems to be ending early. Okay. It should be going on. It had been going on till October 15 or 20. Here we are 10 days or so before that. And I think it's over, yes.
So let's say good weather will be October, November, December, January, February, March. It's about 6 months.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The problem is we've become so overrun with tourists that Luang Prabang is hardly worth visiting now. And that begins to be true at the end of November through the end of January. So you do have to take that into account.
Oh, you're getting packed with tourists now.
Yes. And as I say, the high season is basically Thanksgiving to end of January.
But you're saying the streets, like getting a seat in a restaurant, becomes problematic, that sort of thing?
No, you just can't go down the street. I mean, it's like Bangkok in that you've got these 19th century narrow streets designed for, horse carts.
Right.
And now we've got these big vans in convoy, like 6 big vans coming from Hotel A, 6 other big vans coming from Hotel B, and they meet in opposite directions and you're done.
Wow.
And it's just going to be impassable.
So you need a little electric bike or something to scoot around.
Yeah, you do. But I mean, here we've got 60-year-old Chinese tourists. They're not going to, rent electric bikes. If they didn't have these things, they'd rent tuk-tuks. And so instead of a van, there would be 7 tuk-tuks. I mean, would that be any better? It's just not a soluble problem as far as I can see.
So going back to the weather, April gets really hot, May gets really hot, June gets really hot. And then things
starting to cool off in June, but humidity and rainfall are up. Between the two, I would take June.
So then July starts raining. July, August, September starts.
Yeah. September was quite wet, but as I say, October seems to be drying out already.
But the good news is the water is good in terms of replenishing the various things that have to be replenished. And do you have a well, or do you have water that comes in from the street? We
have water that comes in from the street, but I I've also installed a reverse osmosis machine, so I have good drinking water.
And that comes from the tap, or that comes from the rainwater?
You put water from the tap into the machine, and demineralized water comes out.
Okay, cool. Nice. That's great. So, congratulations on the completion of the house. I guess it's pretty much up and running in all particulars, right? Not much of a punch list.
We are, which is now at about the 70% mark. Dining room is good. Bedroom is good. Kitchen and breakfast room are good. Living room is not good. Office is good. Buddha room not good. So that's still a mixed bag. But hopefully by the end of the year.
Okay, so you got a few more months of work being done.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So when are you coming?
That was the next thing I was going to say. We're planning another trip and trying to figure out the right time frame. But I also want to eventually do a show where you go through the pictures of the final product, because we can't do it tonight. But I think it'll be really an interesting.
I know. I'm planning on a video once the inside is showable, which it's not yet. I would like to do a series of videos.
Yeah, do a
maybe 4 on the outside, maybe 4 or 5 minute shots of the outside, 4 or 5 minute shots of the inside. So I'd like to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next time I come, I'm going to bring a drone in that I'll gift to you that you can use to drone over the river and fly it around your property to kind of look at.
Seriously?
Yeah, because they're
wow.
They're beautiful cameras.
Okay. And let me check the regulatory framework.
That'll be my housewarming gift to you, which will allow you to.
That would be a lot of fun. But as I say, I'd better check the regulatory thingy. The local village and the cops are on my side, so it may be quite doable, but we'll see.
You might have to raise the funding for the next picnic for the local police there.
I do it yearly. I mean.
That's good. Bob, look, you're a philanthropist.
Yeah, no, and they know they can count on me.
You're Professor Robert Acker. You're a philanthropist now, as well as being a local talent, and I'm sure they really appreciate you being there. And I'm sure everyone in the town knows you or knows of you. So congratulations on the transition.
I've enjoyed our talk.
I look forward to the next one. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.